there. My name is Kim Nathan, and many of you may have visited Samish Island Campground or have heard of its beauty. Samish Island is located about an hour south of the U.S.-Canadian border in Washington State. I'm fortunate to have practically grown up on these grounds, having attended camps and reunions there since my early childhood. I was even married there. I call Samish Island my spiritual home, and each time I pull into the driveway onto the grounds, I am filled with a sense of peace and a sense of coming home. The story of how Community of Christ acquired these grounds is a story of immense generosity and humility, and I'd love to share it with you. Back in the late 1920s, a young Norwegian couple by the names of Sig and Tora Fristad purchased a large parcel of property on Samish Island in Skagit County, Washington, which is about an hour or so north of Seattle. They started out raising cattle there and eventually turned to raising turkeys. Sig happened to work with a minister from a church very few in the area had really ever heard of, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Over time, the two men became friends, and through that friendship, Sig and Tora eventually made the decision to join this little church. The Fristads, who later moved away from Samish Island but still owned the property, developed a deep appreciation for the camping programs that the church offered its youth. At this time, the church camps in that area took place at Silver Lake, just around Everett, Washington. Sig and Tora came to feel so strongly about the need for a dedicated site for church youth camps that they ultimately felt led by the Holy Spirit to gift their farmland, over 80 acres, to the church for this purpose. The Fristads presented their proposal to both the British Columbia, Canada district as well as the Seattle district in 1957. While the BC district gladly accepted this generous gift, surprisingly, many folks in the Seattle area did not want to accept this and wanted camps to remain at Silver Lake. It took some time, along with a visit from one of our apostles, but the gift was finally accepted by a fairly close vote at the district conference in 1958, and by summer of 1959, the first reunion was held there. Between 1959 and the early 1960s, a dining hall and restroom facility were built, along with wooden tent platforms. I remember staying in one of those old canvas tents. Sig and Tora purchased a home across the street from the property and served as the campground's first caretakers. Even as the campground developed, with cabins and classroom buildings being added, Sig and Tora remained deeply involved in the operations and events of the campground. Anyone in my age bracket who spent time at Samish as a child will remember Sig's patience and understanding on the dish line, teaching us how to operate the commercial dishwasher, even himself doing the lion's share of the work during our camps and reunions. We will also recall the beautiful floral arrangements that Tora created from her own garden, including the beautiful hanging flower baskets that decorated our dairy barn turned chapel, where we held church services, talent shows, and sing-alongs. In the early 1970s, a man-made saltwater lake was dug out near the bay so that campers would have a safer and warmer place to swim, canoe, and play. That lake was named Fristad Lake, and while I'm sure they felt honored, I also recall that Sig and Tora were somewhat uncomfortable with the attention that it brought them. The Fristads were humble, generous saints who responded to what they understood as the urging of the Holy Spirit to provide a place for youth and families to gather together in fellowship and community. Samish Island Campground and Retreat Center has become a home to a wide variety of user groups, from Zen Buddhists to artists to recovery groups. Even the Samish Nation, the descendants of the original inhabitants of the island, have reconnected with this land and are participating in the continued development and care of their native grounds. Many generations of people from around the Pacific Northwest and well beyond have come to love Samish Island as a sanctuary of peace, a gathering place where hearts and spirits are filled and all are welcome. I think Sig and Tora would be amazed and proud of how their generous gift to the church has continued to touch and change lives far beyond their original vision. There are heroes, models of grace and generosity, two humble and faithful servants who sacrificed a great deal so that others could experience the blessings of community and God's sacred creation in this little corner of the world.
I'm Glenn Fischel. I'm standing in front of the oldest building on the campground. It was here when the campground was given to the church by Sig and Tora Freestead. In 1961, Martha and I came to our first reunion here at Samish Camp. This building was used as a kitchen during the time that the camp was being developed. Adjacent was a house, it was called the White House, and it was used for a lot of the cooking, and the serving was in this building. There was a serving counter out here that they served the people with. And then there was a big tent just behind, or just over there, that was used to eat in. It was a big circus kind of a tent that was set up. And the dish washing was done in this side of the building. If you don't believe me, there's a sink in the corner of that building that was used for that dishwashing. It's a sink about like this. I can't imagine it when there was about 400 people being fed here on the camp. Martha and I came up. She was 8 months pregnant with our first son, Jim. There was a tent area out in the field over here. And the tent that we had a wooden frame. It was a Army surplus tent that we stayed in. We put a mattress down on the floor so that she could be more comfortable at night while we were here. Over on the bank over behind the gazebo, there was a V-shaped trough with about 5 bowls, wash bowls, and hoses running to them that served as the washing place for the people at the camp. And of course we used social distancing for those, so that line was maybe 40 or 50 feet long, and there was about 5 bowls along there. That was used for washing faces, hands, and teeth, and what have you. Down below those, and further down a little bit, were 2 outhouses. These were 2-holers, and they were there for the obvious reasons. Rick Cawthorn and her 3 kids were in the tent next door to ours, and we'll never forget how warm and welcoming she was in assisting us in getting acquainted with the people here on the camp, as well as to just feel comfortable with what was going on at the reunion. Over on this side, where the CFC is today, was an old barn. And that old barn was used as our chapel, a meeting place for us to worship in and have classes and that type of thing. That building was replaced in 1971 with the CFC, pretty much on the exact same location. The thing I can remember most about the worship and the classes and what have you at that camp in 1961 was the fact that all of the ministers that were here to serve as leaders and ministers for the reunion were dressed in black or dark suits, white shirts and ties. And that always looked so different from everybody else that was on the campgrounds that was here in casual clothes and so forth in a camp setting. But those gentlemen always wore those very well-dressed clothing. Martha and I fell in love with the camp at that reunion, and for 59 years we've been here to serve, to worship, to share in fellowship with others, to be a leader at a time. I was president of the board of directors for 15 years here, and during that time we did about $1 million worth of improvements to the camp, including putting in the e-cabins, revising the RV park, and a number of other things that needed to be fixed. It's been our pleasure to be at the camp over these years, and this camp has served as a place of learning for all of us that attend here, learning how to live zionically together, and it's been a pleasure doing so. Thank you.
Can you hear it? Can you hear the calling of generations past? Feel the quickening of spirit, the sense of homecoming as you drive up Scott Road and turn left up that long driveway? My relationship with this sacred space that we call Samish Island began when I was 9 months old, when I attended my very first reunion with my parents. I don't remember much of anything about that long ago event, but at the cellular level, the deepest and most elemental part of me, I was marked by the power of divine place, drawn in and welcomed home by a community that would help, in time, shape me into my best self. And from that point on, my spirit ever yearned to reconnect to the divine in this space. I suspect that within my story, you can hear your own. And for a few moments, I give voice to our collective story of these sacred grounds. Reunion as a child was the smell of Play-Doh and the taste of apple juice and graham crackers in the kindergarten classroom. It was walking with my family through the grass heavy with dew as we made our way in the early morning light and the fresh Samish smell from our trailer to the dining hall for breakfast. It was the blistering heat of the large metal slide at the playground. It was the Graceland Ramblers singing and dancing their ways into our hearts. It was accidentally gulping a mouthful of salt water swimming in Lake Freestad and admiring the big teenagers who could swim all the way out to the dock. It was the rock and how it served as the primary hub of activity for us kids. It was trying to find our ragged meal tickets for Paul Duvick and Del Coleman to punch at the front of the long meal lines that stretched all the way down to Scott Road, or at least that's how it felt as a kid. It was Jacob's Ladder and Spirit of the Living God. And it only takes a spark as we watch the herons fly homeward to the white forest and the sun go down at campfire. It was Winston Inslee as Little Bit the Clown, miming his way up the center aisle in the chapel. And oh, the chapel. A once functioning barn for the Freestads turned into a sanctuary and worship space, a sweet cedar-smelling structure that saw generations of barn swallows flying in and out of their nests, amidst the sermons delivered and hymns sung so loudly that I could hear it drifting on the breeze all the way to the nursery where I loved to help as a teen. Do you hear your story within my story? The single thread that connects the tapestry of my reunion memories and experiences is the people. The community of people who, year after year, choose to step out of their individual lives and pursuits and come together in intentional community, in Zionic living for a brief time. This sacred space and these people who cradled me and provided a strong foundation for me as a child became guideposts for me into my teenage and young adult years, as I stretched my wings and grew in my awareness that God is alive and well and knows me and loves me. When you are touched and named and commissioned in this way by the divine, the very ground in that space becomes holy ground, imbued with the essence and energy and majesty of our loving Creator. This is Samish for me, and I suspect this is Samish for you too. Can you hear your story within my story?